Hey everybody, welcome back to Building Blocks. I'm Brian Reese. We're at WhiteMetalGames, and we have given our terrain piece here time to cure. The Gorilla Glue's expanded nicely. You can see some of the overhang here from the just chunks of foam I Gorilla Glued to it earlier. I've already started to trim this part up a little bit with the extending blade because I wanted to go ahead and get this done off camera so it won't be so monotonous to watch. This is going to go right here. So we have a nice flat section there I've already picked out. So I guess first things first, we have these pieces of bamboo skewer, like grill skewer sticking out from last time. Let's go ahead and clip those. It's okay to leave the wood in there because it reinforces it, and we could always slice through it with our extending blade. You can see why I beveled the edges of the MDF before I glued it down, because it gives us a pretty good guide which angle to cut at. If you're using a hot wire foam cutter at home, you could just cut along this. It'll really help keep the shape of the hill or whatever piece you're making. And always cut away from yourself. If you're going to cut towards yourself, make sure you have some kind of mechanism in place to not slice your throat or something. And always use a fresh blade. They cost nothing. I don't know, what are they, like 10 cents or something each? And don't try and cut through all of it at once. Do multiple passes. Don't force it. Kind of work with the foam. You can feel the grain of it. When I say it like that, I feel like some old-timey like carpenter or something. Like, you feel the grain of the wood. Might need a little bit of elbow grease to get through some of those pieces of dowel or toothpicks in there. And if I'm not sure where I'm cutting, I'll just put another cut at a different angle to get a chunk off to make sure it's going the angle I want it to. And to find out what's stopping it, there's something stopping it there. So just take little pieces at a time, don't rush. Also be careful not to, snap the blade off. So just using my beveled edges as a guide here. Just cutting our slope. Just see pieces of toothpick and bamboo skewer coming off with it. I recommend doing this over a trash can or doing it outside, especially once you get to the sanding. Another thing I didn't mention earlier, when you're going to be sanding this stuff, it's really bad for you. And even if you're just going to be doing it for 10 seconds or something, you're just doing a little edge. Oh, that sounded terrible. If you're just sanding a little edge or something, remember, you're hovering right over this thing. And these are little particles just floating in the air. You're going to be breathing all that in. Even if you don't feel it, you're breathing it in. And if you build a lot of terrain over the course of your lifetime, you're going to do a lot of damage to your organs that way. So just put on a mask. Doesn't have to be a fancy mask. I mean, even if you're just putting your shirt over your face or something, it beats a blank. So little by little, we're just going to pull these undesired pieces away until we get a shape we really like. Cut's a little too deep, so I'll cut from a different angle. Just take off a chunk of it. Now I wanted a big piece of rock or something jutting out here, so I don't want to carve into it too much. Slope looks nice and everything, but And if you have a dog, they're gonna hate that noise. Also sounds terrible on speakerphone too, so I'm sure it sounds terrible when you're watching a video. Okay. Now we're gonna clean up the top part a little bit. That repetitive motion injury, my left thumb. I get my hand away from that while I'm cutting. Definitely don't want to cut towards yourself. And if you see little pieces of skewer sticking out like that, just clip it off. Starting to look like the original shape I was hoping for. Let's change the angle of the slope a little bit on this part here. Then I can show you guys how to make rocks. So if you're noticing here, we put a lot of foam on here initially just to cut it away. It leaves your options open. It's kind of an organic process. You want the thing to look like an actual hill. You want it to look like this is how the earth is sculpted, so you don't want it to be too rigid in your process. Go. Sometimes you can saw through those pieces of dowel, and if not, just clip it. Now we're gonna sand this. We're gonna put spackle over it, so it can look a little bit ugly right now. It's okay. Kind of liking that shape right there. So without too much work, we can kind of add to that with some of the scrap pieces I have over here, which is what I really wanted to show you guys. How to make pieces of rock out of this. Now I see a lot of people, they'll get these molds, plaster molds, to make like the faces of like cliffs or rocks or whatever, and then they'll put the cast next to each other and use all kinds of glue and break off pieces of it. I think this is so much quicker. This is so much more easy to manipulate than plaster. You also don't get anything repetitive this way. Each piece is kind of hand sculpted in a way, so you're not going to see the same pieces of rock over and over. I'm liking the way this is looking right now. Want to be kind of impassable on this side. Now we get our masks out because we're going to do a little bit of sanding. All right, you can usually get a pack of like 5 or 10 masks for $5 at the hardware store. If you want to get really fancy with it, if you're going to do a lot of this stuff, working with sawdust and all that, you want to get one of the more expensive masks, like they're $50 or $60. They have fancier filters on there. But this works for our purposes. All right, guys, so I have some 120 grit sandpaper here. This is probably the finest grit sandpaper I would use for what we're about to do right now. Ideally, 80 grit would be great for this. Doesn't matter how coarse because we're going to spackle over it. So if you can see up close there, these little edges that just didn't come out super smooth from when we were cutting this up. That's what we're focusing on. So before we focus on the slope, let's focus on the actual edge here. Just round that off nice. You can probably see all this MDF dust now with these lights, and that's why we're wearing a mask. Remember, we're going to spackle over this too and then sand that down a little bit, so this doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. Now, if you have a sanding bit for a drill or something, that will work on this, but just don't overdo it because those things are pretty powerful on this foam. It might shred it, so yeah, just feel it out. I've definitely used a drill, a sanding drill bit on this before. It works just fine, especially if you're doing some heavy duty sanding. Okay, that looks pretty smooth for the most part. Now, I can't do that at home. My wife would kill me. All right, we're going to do a little bit of rocks on here. Now, we already have some good looking rocks right there. We're gonna add a layer or two over it. I like using scrap pieces for this. Cut it at weird angles. Try and get random with yourself here. And then this is part of the process. This is part of my process anyway. I just start sticking pieces of foam to it until I see a shape that looks really natural. See if, I don't know if you can see this there, but I kind of like that shape because with a little bit of spackle in there and a little bit of crushing it with a rock later, that looks like a rock to me. Boulder or something. So another thing, do you see the blue ink that they put on the foam here? This will show through acrylic paint and some layers that you put on top of it, like sawdust and all that. So for the most part, you want to try and spackle over that or cut it off or sand it off. Try not to have that showing by the time we're putting our final textures on before painting. Did I have this before? There we go. Now, if you remember from the last session, we were using this Gorilla Glue, which is activated with moisture. I'm gonna use a little Q-tip to smear the water around here. And we definitely don't want that much Gorilla Glue on this. Test the piece first, make sure we're putting Gorilla Glue only where we need it, because this stuff will get hard and it won't create the same texture when you crush as a rock as the foam. So we're really just using enough here to make it adhere to the foam. And this stuff is so thick, oh my God. Once you get towards the bottom of a bottle, you gotta wait 20 minutes for it to get down to the nozzle there. If you can remember from last time, the Gorilla Glue expands, and a little tiny light piece of foam like this, it will definitely push it away. So we want to skewer the crap out of this. From different angles. So we have 3 different angles. The toothpicks going in there. That should hold it, I think. So let's find another piece of foam here. Now I do this in layers like this because it's really fighting my brain trying to make things look symmetrical. The human brain just wants everything to be right and left, the exact same on this side as this side. So when you're trying to make a piece of terrain that's a hill, that's a natural feature, like the way the earth looks, it's kind of hard to make a rock sometimes because a rock is not symmetrical necessarily. So that's why I do layers. I constantly battle what I did before. And with enough layers, enough undoing certain things, it looks pretty natural in the end, I think. Now that's a cool angle right there. Once you start to get the hang of this, this is really an addictive process. It's really fun. Looks pretty good right there. Once again, we don't need that much glue. That should suffice. A little bit of water, let's smear that around. Make sure all that Gorilla Glue activates. I'll put a few skewers in there, hold it down. It doesn't feel quite secure. I'm going to put one more for good measure. Yeah, one more. I don't trust this thing. There we go. Cut that off a little bit there. Now, since we've added extra pieces here, these are multiple pieces. We're trying to make like one rock. So as you can see right there, right where they join up, I just try to make that even so there's no seam. When I come back with the spackle, you shouldn't be able to even see that this is two pieces. I think we need something on this side. This is looking, it's a nice slope and all, but it needs something jutting out. Find a good looking piece of foam here. I usually keep a bucket or a big Tupperware bin or something next to my work area, because like pieces like this, especially the 2-inch foam, you know, it's like $36 or $38 or something for a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet. This is actually pretty pricey when you think about it. This little piece of foam is, you know, at least 10-15 cents. I don't know, maybe I sound cheap, but it will come back in handy later, especially if you do a lot of rocks. Stuff like this, the little shavings, you can't really do much with it. Recycle it if you can. I try and use all of the foam as I go. So that's why I keep pieces like this just set to the side. At least pieces this size or this size. Gotta save those sea turtles. And I'm gonna put a nice, obnoxious looking rock jutting out here so you won't be able to shoot over it. Now here's a trick I want to show you guys. I've put the blade probably halfway through the foam piece there, and this is a really nice texture you can get when you're making rocks. You just pop it. See how it rips there? Once you put some black or, you know, burnt umber colored acrylic primer over that, give it a stone gray dry brush and then a really light highlight over that, that's stone. I mean, why would you ever pour caster into a mold, break it off, add more plaster and putty to it on top of that, just to do what I could do here by breaking the foam off? That's cool rock texture, especially if you do it in all different angles. So, where was I? In the process of showing you guys that, I just ruined a good piece of foam that I thought was perfect for this. I'll have to find another one. Always watch the fingers. Always keep in mind where your fingers are in relation to the blade. Now we got foam flying everywhere here. Alright, that looks kind of nice right there. Although that might be coming out into the space we had for the that works, I think. All right, we're gonna go ahead and skewer this thing down. And maybe between now and the next session, I'll buy another bottle of Gorilla Glue, so you don't have to wait for it to come to the nozzle. Smear the water around so it activates. There's my toothpicks. This is probably going to take 4 toothpicks to skewer down. Remember, skewer from all different angles. Get in there really tight. There we go. That looks kind of nice. Now we have this little part here. I can't decide if that should be a slope or if that should be more rock. I kind of feel like it should be a slope. And that way this hill would just slope up nice like that, and there'll be like little cliff face, rock outcrops on the other side of it. So let's try that. Let's try smoothing all this out. And once you start to cut a slope through multiple layers like that, that's when it starts to look like a hill. Now we are going to have to sand this again. This is originally going to be a rock 5 minutes ago. Now I think it would look better as a slope. So I don't know if you remember the original sketch we did. This is already starting to look a little different, but I'm happy with where this is going. The original point was to showcase all the different techniques we use. We're still doing that. One of the most important things I wanted to stress was don't get attached to any one idea. I mean, be willing to change in the middle of a project if something looks better. If you're learning something new you didn't know was possible, and it might change the entire plan of attack for a project. Don't be afraid of things like that. That slope's looking pretty good. I'm gonna come back and sand it a little more. You can see where we cut into that Gorilla Glue before. That's really all it is foam. It's expanding foam. It's a little bit denser than the blue-green insulation foam we're using. But it's the same stuff. It leaves the same texture when you cut it. I think we're almost done with the rocks in here. I feel like we need something right there. Smaller rock, maybe. Let's find a good looking piece here. It's kind of like putting a 3D puzzle together. I mean, that's the best way I can describe to work with foam rocks like this. It's a 3D puzzle where you could force fit a piece that shouldn't belong. Let me put it like that. I hate puzzles, man. I get so frustrated. There we go. Yeah, it's a nice looking piece. Okay, we'll put that in there. Now it's got like 3 different planes there that are gonna be touching, 3 points of contact. So I wanna keep putting it back to remind myself where I actually need to put the glue. We don't wanna put any more than we need, because this stuff will expand and look more like sludge than rocks if we put too much. Good Lord, this stuff is thick. All right. Let's skewer this one. And I think that's looking pretty good. I need a smaller rock down here. So in nature, wherever you have big boulders or cliff faces, rocky outcrops like this, there's going to be smaller pieces of rock around it. Or over the past couple million years, it might have cracked in half, or who knows. I'll just grab a little tiny piece. If you really want that rock texture, remember, cut halfway through. And if that looks too symmetrical for us, let's come at it from another angle. Do it like that too. It's looking like a rock, right? All right. So we're gonna put this piece down at the bottom of the rocky outcrops, so it looks like it's crumbled over the past couple eons or something. Right about there. One more toothpick and that should be secured. Okay. Starting to look like something, right? If not a little Hellraiser-ish, right? So we're all sanded now. We need to put a little bit of spackle on the edges here so you won't see the seams between the different levels of foam, or between the foam and the MDF, or any of the little holes that we put in there from the toothpicks. So I'm gonna get a little bit of our spackle here. I have a plastic putty knife from before. This putty knife, I believe I've had it for 5 years. It was like $6 for a 3-pack. I actually prefer the plastic ones to the metal ones because the metal ones will just dig into the foam. And we don't want that. We want the foam to kind of push back into the plastic putty knife here. I recommend doing this outside as well, or at least somewhere where you don't have to worry about carpets. Pro tip, if you plan on not listening to what I'm saying right now and doing this on the carpet anyway, and your wife finds out, or your husband, or whoever finds out, and you're in trouble, go get a grill brush, and it scrapes up right out of the carpet. Same with like in a garage on concrete, it scrapes right up. But you might still get in trouble. But I'm just giving you a way out right now, if that happens. No, honey, it's okay. I got this grill brush. I'll pop it right out of the carpet. So as you can see, I'm trying to completely cover up the seam between the foam and the MDF there. And even the bits of foam where there's gaps and stuff. Try and fill all that in, just make it look nice and smooth and slopey. Now when I was gluing the rocks before, you don't necessarily have to use Gorilla Glue. You could use Elmer's glue as well. Just make sure you give it, 24 hours to dry, because you're gonna be using a lot of Elmer's glue if you do that. I like the Gorilla Glue because as it's expanding right now, I can go ahead and start spackling around it. If it pushes some of the spackle out of the way, we'll deal with it when we're sanding or adding another layer of spackle. But I like the Gorilla Glue because it doesn't stop work while I'm waiting for it to dry necessarily. There we go. That looks pretty good. This part right here, I'm going to put our hatch there. All right, got some super glue somewhere under all my foam that's been flying around for the past 10 minutes or so. Now this is the Cyanoacrylate super glue. This is the kind that first layer of the foam, the one that has that kind of eggshell surface on it we talked about before, it shouldn't melt that. It will melt the sides of it though. So it's important that I glue this to the eggshell surface. And yeah, you could use the Gorilla Glue for this as well. Just make sure you weight it down and understand that it might ooze out a little bit on the edges, foam up. So there might be a little bit of cleanup work. I'm just gonna hold that down for a second. All right, guys. So we have some rocks curing on there with Gorilla Glue. We have some spackle on the slopes. All that's gonna have to be sanded down, and we're gonna add another coat of spackle in between these rocky layers once that cures and we snip all the toothpicks off. But we're in pretty good shape here. I'm gonna let this cure, come back in about an hour, and yeah. So in the next video, we are going to do some sanding, a little bit of spackle on the rocks, and we're going to get some nice rock texture using a parking lot rock on there. So this has been Building Blocks. I'm Brian Reese. I'll see you guys next time.